fourth generation form, BMW's X5 demonstrates the brand's latest advances in technology, design and safety. Most importantly though, it's once again difficult to better in the large SUV segment if you prioritise a dynamic drive. The result is a car that, though no longer head and shoulders above the competition, can still set the standard most of them aspire to. As the Munich maker puts it, the boss is back.
The X5 might have developed significantly over its 4 generations, but there's been one constant. It's always driven well. Whether anything weighing up to 2.2 tonnes in weight and nearly 1.8 metres in height can ever defy the laws of physics enough to match BMW's description of this model as a driver's car is another question. But there's no doubt that body control really is excellent for a vehicle of this kind. Refinement's excellent too. BMW's finally settled on the kind of standard damping setup that a modern-era mainstream X5 should have. A 2-axle air-sprung system that can adapt itself for either on- or off-road use. As for what lies beneath the bonnet, well, as before, most buyers are likely to choose the xDrive 30D variant we're trying here. It gets a revised 265 horsepower version of the straight-six single turbo 3-litre diesel used previously, combined with an improved 8-speed Steptronic Sport auto gearbox featuring wider ratios, slicker change electronics and even launch control. This volume variant records 45.6 mpg on the combined cycle and 162 grams per kilometre of CO2. Should you require a higher level of straight-line performance from your diesel X5, your dealer will point you instead to the M50D variant, which uses a multi-stage turbocharging system composed of 2 high-pressure and 2 low-pressure turbochargers. The combined setup delivers 400 horsepower, and you can get that power down through the bends thanks to a standard electronically controlled rear differential lock. Petrol-wise, your options begin with the 340 horsepower xDrive 40i, but essentially the same engine also features in another petrol X5 variant you can ask your dealer about, the xDrive 45e iPerformance plug-in hybrid. Here, a 282 horsepower version of the 3-litre 6 pairs up with a 112 HP electric motor fed by a lithium-ion battery pack. 2 V8 petrol X5s complete the range, the xDrive 50i and the flagship X5M Motorsport tuned variant. In the unlikely event that you're an X5 buyer prioritising off-P stability, there's an optional X off-road pack which gives you a sump guard, specific driving screen interfaces and a series of transmission and suspension settings for various different surfaces. BMW tends to describe X5 styling as deliberately evolutionary, which means design changes chosen carefully so as not to alienate existing buyers. That's hardly an approach geared towards innovation, but it's appropriate as part of the more subtle interpretation of the crossover genre that's provided by this model's sports activity vehicle branding. Under the skin lies the cluster architecture platform used in the company's luxury saloons, and it's provided for a significant increase in size this time round. The 66mm width enhancement actually makes this G05 series design wider than its X7 big brother, and compared to the old F15 series model, is 42mm longer and 19mm higher. The previous generation model was already very nice to sit in, but here things feel more upmarket still, with a glut of more sophisticated and better incorporated digital screen technology. It's not as muted and deliberately understyled as an Audi Q7, nor as brash and in your face as the latest generation Mercedes GLE. Instead, it plots a middle way that for us hits the mark perfectly. You sit a fraction lower than you would in some other SUVs, which accentuates the sportier feel, gripping a lovely tactile 3-spoke wheel through which you glimpse instrumentation that's a model of class and clarity. After years of bringing us rather half-hearted digital instrument displays that weren't completely configurable, BMW's finally bitten the bullet and delivered here a decently sized and properly customisable instrument binnacle screen as part of its new Live Cockpit Professional package. That combines this 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster display with a centre dash infotainment monitor of the same size. All of it accessible via touchscreen, the usual lower iDrive touch controller and your voice, the latter element working via a new Hey BMW voice recognition system that most owners will find easier to get to grips with. Time to check out the rear, which is where you'd expect this 4th generation model's extra 42mm of wheelbase length to pay dividends. And sure enough, once you take a seat in the second row, you'll quickly appreciate the extra leg and shoulder space on offer if you've owned an earlier generation version of this car. Taking a third person back here is easier too, not only because of this reshaped body's extra width. The centre transmission tunnel's notably low, and the middle part of the seat base isn't raised uncomfortably, as is the case with some rivals. This G05 series model's upgraded size will also help if you're amongst the 40% of buyers who'll specify the optional third row seating. Another advantage of having the 7-seat option is that it entitles you to a more flexible second row bench with 10 degrees of backrest rake adjustment and 80mm of fore and aft seat-based adjustment. This two-piece tailgate is an idea that BMW borrowed from Land Rover when it owned the company a couple of decades back, and with this generation model, the Bavarian brand has got round to making the bottom section electrically powered as well as the top. Once everything's flat, up to 1,860 litres of space is freed up. For 2 decades now, the X5 model line has defined the kind of car a large luxury SUV should be. No other model in this class is so easy to transition into from a large luxury saloon. But once you've done so, all the crossover qualities that people look for in this segment are present and correct. The more assertive looks, the commanding driving position, the additional practicality, and the extra off-tarmac ability. It's all there, but in a car that can take on twisty tarmac with astonishing confidence for something so high and heavy. A benchmark then, just as X5s have always been.